So here's the intro of the game, and you're probably thinking, wow, that looks like shit. I know it does, but give credit where credit is due. Considering the hardware limits of the Genesis, at least they tried to make a CGI intro. By the way, this game was developed by Traveler's Tales. Yeah, the very same people who butchered the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro games. Enough said. And just like the previous Sonic games, Dr. Robotnik captures animals and uses them for his robots. But this time, instead of just destroying them and setting the animals free, you gotta save these annoying birds called Flickies from these robots, and you gotta carry them with you throughout most of the entire game. And no, I'm not kidding when I said they were annoying. They really are annoying when you play the game. Now, despite the shitty intro, the graphics look great for Genesis standards. Unfortunately, actually playing it is where it suffers. You see how Sonic is running and twisting around like a retard? That's because of how crippled the controls and the mechanics are. And the reason why the controls are so bad and so imprecise is because the developers put together two things that simply just don't work. As you can see, the game is in an isometric view instead of a traditional side-scrolling view. Now, I don't know what Sega and Traveler's Tales were going for, but an isometric game with sprites does not make it 3D in the slightest. And even if this wasn't marketed as a 3D game, it still doesn't work. In order to play this game, you'll be mostly running fast, jumping, and avoiding enemies and traps in diagonal directions, using the D-pad. How the fuck does this even work? I'll be happy to give you an answer. It doesn't. This makes playing a lot more frustrating than it's supposed to be. And the level design doesn't help that much either. The first zone isn't too bad, but it gets a lot worse as soon as you get to the second one. Let me give you some examples. In Rusty Ruin Act 2, you have to head up this big slope, but in order to do that, you have to jump on the springboard so you can get on the platforms that randomly appear to help you bounce up. Most of the time, you're going to end up going straight left, and you might not be so lucky trying to hit a platform, and that's because of how shitty the controls are. Spring Stadium is very annoying because there's so many traps ahead of you, and you have to avoid them as much as you can, even with the handicap controls. Volcano Valley is also an annoying stage. Most of the time, you're jumping over lava diagonally. You know what they say, easier said than done. And do not even get me started with Gene Gadget Act 2, because there's this part with a gigantic slope and you have to jump from one platform to another until you reach the right path. But unless you have a guide or the patience of a priest to figure out where to go, you're going to be stuck here for a very long time. And if you don't go the correct path, you'll fall down and slide all the way back to an area filled with electrical traps. God, even talking about this game gets him on my fucking nerves. The Robotnik stages are the most annoying stages in the game, especially Volcano Valley Act 3. All I gotta say is good luck trying to avoid most of his attacks when you get the chance to play this game. Surprisingly though, the final boss is actually pretty easy. But the most annoying thing in general about this game, aside from the controls, are of course, the Flickies. Now here's a perfect analogy. You know those single moms that have kids that are really spoiled and you have to take them almost everywhere like shopping and shit, but yet they refuse to respect the mom and end up causing a lot of trouble? That's kind of what the Flickies are in the game. And Sonic is the babysitter. I mean, I could understand losing them if you get hit first, but you could end up losing them if they get hit and you don't. They couldn't make it as easy as, say, the Yoshi eggs in Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. I mean, come on. I especially hate the red Flicky because he jumps back and forth like a kid with mental problems that you can't even control, even if you spank them real hard. This is why I call the Flickies fuckers. You know why? Combine the L and I and you get a U, which fits perfectly. I learned that from Sean Connery, by the way. This is why the best stage is Panic Puppet Act 2, because there's no annoying Flickies whatsoever. The Sonic games on the Genesis always had unique special zones, and they were always fun to play. Unfortunately in 3D Blast, even the special zones suck. Take a look and see what I mean. The Genesis Sonic games have always put out kick-ass soundtracks, and this game is no exception. My favorite songs have to be Rusty Ruin Acts 1 and 2 and Panic Puppet Act 2. One last thing before I end the review. Have you noticed the way Sonic runs? He doesn't even look like he's running. He looks more like he's jogging, like if it's just an ordinary happy day for him. You know, I think this would be an appropriate song for him. I'm gonna save the world by jogging, 'cause I don't give a fuck. No, I don't. I just don't give a flying fuck. So that's Sonic 3D Blast for the Genesis. It's annoying, it's frustrating, and it's just simply not fun to play. Thankfully, it's not one of the worst, but it's still pretty bad. I give it a shit brown. Sonic 3D Blast was also released on the Sega Saturn and PC. I never played the PC version, but I definitely played the Sonic version, and it's a little bit better than the Genesis version. So I'm going to talk briefly about this version and see what improvements they did. First off, they added an FMV intro with Sonic in fully rendered CGI, but that's to be expected since the Saturn is a lot more powerful. Second, they improved the graphics a bit, but even with that improvement, for Sega Saturn standards, it's not really all that impressive. The music is replaced with CD quality tracks, a lot of which sound a lot better than the Genesis tracks. Again, that is to be expected since the Saturn is a lot more powerful, but I think there's a bit too much techno and trance music later in the game. And if you have the Sega Saturn analog controller, which was originally bundled with Knights, you can play this game using the analog stick, which makes the controls a lot more fluid and responsive for this type of game. But the biggest improvement of them all is the bonus stages. How much did they improve on it? Take a look. The bonus stages are actually in 3D! Now, of course, nowadays it's not such a big deal, but back then it was mind-blowing to see Sonic in 3D. Mainly because there was no true 3D Sonic game at the time, and the one that was going to get released for the Saturn was unfortunately cancelled. Now here's a fun fact. Even though this game was developed by Traveler's Tales, Sonic Team worked on the bonus stages of the Saturn version. They didn't develop a full-fledged 3D Sonic game at the time because they were working on Knights. The game still has its problems like the flickies and the level design, but all in all, the Saturn version of 3D Blast is okay. I give it a bronze. Sonic 3D Blast was a great idea that was executed very poorly, and all it was a game to fill in the delays of Sonic Extreme, which ended up getting cancelled. And we wouldn't get a true 3D Sonic game until Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast in 1999. You know, it's funny because back in the day, people were begging for a 3D Sonic game. Nowadays, people hate 3D Sonic with a passion. Now, if you want my opinion, the 3D Sonic series is hit and miss at best. Some were great, others were just downright terrible. Anyway, I'm Allie-RX, and I wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year 2012. Hope you guys had a wonderful holiday and a wonderful year, and I will see you all in the year of the apocalypse.